But at this time, so we are not too far behind in our program, I would like to introduce our luncheon speaker. Dr. Charles Roth is a clinical psychologist who specializes in neuropsychological assessment. Dr. Roth received a BA from St. Joseph's University, a master's from Drexel University, and a master's and a PhD from the California School of Professional Psychology. Dr. Roth's specialization grew from figuring out what types of services and school placements would work best for his daughter, Caitlin. This meant learning a lot about systems as well, like the school district. Caitlin attended Maplebrook School for high school and then completed the CAPS and TLC programs. MBS, without a doubt, made a critical and continuing difference for Caitlin. She is currently at the college internship program in Berkeley, California, and doing very well. And Dr. Roth, in addition to his practice, has been in the psychology staff at the Children's Health Council at Stanford University, was a lecturer and supervisor for students in the Master's Counseling Program at San Francisco State University, did court-appointed evaluations for families with children with special needs at the San Francisco Unified Family Court, and started a learning program for gifted and talented students with learning and retention problems at Bay School of San Francisco. And Dr. Roth continues as a consultant at the Bay School. Dr. Roth has given presentations at the California Association of Independent Schools, the Association of Educational Therapists, Parents Education Network, and is a guest lecturer in the Educational Therapy Program at University of California in Santa Cruz. I don't know where he finds the time to do it. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Charles Roth here with us today. Let's welcome Dr. Roth.
Thank you very much, and I hope you find something in what I say that's worthwhile. And I'm going to start by, well, first thing I actually want to say is that it's about Maplebrook. And without a doubt, Maplebrook has made such a critical difference in Caitlin's life. And it's not only what happened here during her 7 years, but it's also all the experiences that she internalized and that she takes with her every day in her life now as she continues to grow in a program in Berkeley called College Internship Program. So actually, my topic is independence, and this is what I'm going to start out with. I'm going to quote from Lala, and you wonder, who is Lala? Lala, it was Caitlin's wonderful great aunt Alice. Her nickname was Lala. And I remember right after we were having Caitlin's christening, and we had a party at the house, and Lala said to me, now everything that you do is going to be to help Caitlin grow up and move away. And I thought, sorry, I'm going to get jumped out. She's a wonderful person. And it's really the truth. That's our job as parents. Not when we're 1 month old, obviously, right? But, and this just went through my head. One of my favorite people to read about child rearing is Barry Brazelton. And he wrote a book about toddlers. And I love the toddlers and parents. And the subtitle, I love it, because it kind of captures what toddlerhood is about. The subtitle is, it's a declaration of independence. And that's really, and I think I don't want to be flippant about this, but I think sometimes with being a teenager, it's somewhat like being toddlers, except they have mobility, they can talk back. And so it's kind of a repeat. But it's a really normal developmental stage where basically what's going on for teenagers is they are getting ready to move off into the world. And course, where that can be difficult is when you have kids with special needs because they need added support. And sometimes it's hard for them to have the added support because part of them is really just wanting to be independent, you know? Like helping with homework. I don't know if that Caitlin crazy. But when Caitlin got into middle school, oh my God, could I help her with her homework? Are you kidding me? Everything I said was, that's not right, that's wrong, that's not what the teacher said. And part of it was just, of course, she wanted to do it herself, right? Bad but out, in other words, right? So I would say that for most teenagers, and we're talking about young adults too, the 3 areas of independence I want to just mention is, or talk about, is job. And what I mean by their job is school. Because that is mostly what a teenager's job is their schooling, their peer group, and just generally negotiating the world. Okay? And this is what I find with students that I work with that have a set of challenges similar to students at Maplebrook School, is that in the school that they've been in, whether it's a public school or a private school, what starts to happen, particularly in middle school, is that the pace of instruction is just too quick. It's just like, talk about an outdated, what do you call it, analogy. It's like it's moving at like 78 RPMs versus, isn't that really outdated? Rather than 33 and a third RPM. And it's just too quick, okay? And of course what's happening with the material too is it's becoming more complex and it's more abstract. And kids with certain kind of cognitive challenges, that's really difficult for them. And then the homework load increases. And partly what the homework load, assumes is that the student works independently. And that just doesn't work for a lot of students with learning disabilities. I don't know how many times I've heard, like for instance, when I was on the psychology staff at Stanford, we would have team meetings, and someone would say, well, the parents just don't understand. They have to get out and let the student do it independently. And I would think, what planet are you from? Because they just were not capable of doing it independently because they couldn't figure out like where the assignments were or how to start an essay. But anyway, so that's part of the problem is the level of independence. And then the other thing that's wonderful about high school in particular for students is participating in things like running for office or being in clubs or being in a play or participating in a music program or participating in sports. Now, of course, my point in bringing these things that I just mentioned is that this is difficult for our students because, for instance, like in sports, most public schools work on what would you call a cut system, I guess. Is people try out for volleyball or whatever, and if they make it good and if they don't, they're cut. And so our students are really at a disadvantage with this on the whole because it's they may not have the same level of what do you call it, coordination, for instance, or to be able to get quick directions. And also they're not working with teachers or staff just understand them, And that is one of the wonderful things, well, there's a couple of many wonderful things about Maplebrook, but one is that the staff gets their students. And Maplebrook, and I see this when I compare this to other schools, Maplebrook knows who they work well with. And that's the type of students that they take. And some schools don't do that. They take a whole wide range of kids. And that's not the best. It just doesn't... Knowing who you work with well is a real plus. And then teachers, this will be no surprise to you, are not in it for the money. And what you have here with the staff and the faculty is they love these students. Like yesterday, we had dinner with Lori Hale and with Monica Collix, and Lori's mentioned when she sees some of her students, she gets tearful. And it's because you really put your heart and soul into your students, and it makes such a big difference when you have a staff who just understands and is not doing things like they're lazy or if only they tried harder. This kind of stuff drives me totally nuts. I mean, it doesn't mean that they couldn't try harder sometimes, but it's like, well, but they don't get the math at the pace that it's being taught, things like that. Okay, peer group. Of course, peer groups for teenagers means everything. Everything. So if you think about, like, one of the things that I do for recreation is I love to watch movies about teenagers. And what are they always about? I know I have a very narrow focus. They're always about their friends, right? And what they're doing with their friends. Or like if you've seen that TV series years ago, Freaks and Geeks, it's all about what's going on with the peer system, right? And one of the things when Caitlin was in middle school, what I realized and her mother realized is we could not be her peer group. As much as we love her and we could think about a million great things for her to be involved with, and she was, but we couldn't be her peer group. And then what happens, and I heard a parent mention this in one of the meetings I was at this morning, is sometimes it happens around 4th, 5th grade with girls where they get really critical of each other. But then by the time you get into middle school and high school, kids are not tolerant of differences, the vast majority of them. And this is where kids get at risk for being bullied. And that sets a whole other thing where you're going to school and you feel unsafe, or you know that you're going to be dumped on. And this is not doing anything for being able to pay attention and focus, certainly not if you're feeling good about yourself, right? So acceptance and inclusion is so important, and kids tend to be very exclusive. It's like who fits in, who fits out. It's like, so it's very difficult for our kids. And then the other thing I would say on the whole is students with learning differences, but I'm thinking about Maplebrook students, their maturity level is different too. So they may be much more interested in things that are appealing to younger children. And and so it's like they're kind of not with it in the same way that other like 9th to 10th grade students are, So this is another area, of course, so you have problems with that, the academic situation, with the peer group, and then the other areas of just negotiating the world. And what I mean are things like public, well, of course, we live in, Caitlin grew up in San Francisco, so we're talking about a metropolitan area. How to use public transportation, right? How to use cash and make sure that you're getting the right change. So there's like practical life skills, but there's also something with, I would say, I'm just going to refer them to our students, because I think it's one way of putting it, is that there's a level of naivete or trusting. And as we all know, you cannot trust everybody in life, right? And so, so this is another area where kids need, our students need particular help. And I'm going to tell you a story about Caitlin one time. So this was a couple of years ago. I think I really choked up, excuse me. So Caitlin and I are taking a walk. We're walking from where I live over to the Castro. And as we're walking, this woman comes up who's probably, I don't know, maybe, what do you think, Caitlin, 25, something like that, 30, something like that. And she came up to Caitlin, we're walking together, and she said, "Oh, can I use your cell phone?" And Caitlin looked at her like this and said, "Are you crazy?" And I thought, yes! Because that's what you call good judgment. feisty. So that woman knew. She was not a target, and she meant what she said, right? She backed me off. And she said something inappropriate, which I won't repeat. So anyway, but you can fill in the blanks. But okay, so basically what happens when you have these three areas again, the school, the peer group, negotiating the world, it begins to affect the student's self-esteem, no surprise, self-confidence, and then kids can get anxious and depressed. And of course, when it affects your self-confidence, then you kind of just give up, or you just predict. That's when I say anxious. It's just like kids kind of just predict, I'm not going to be able to do this, or I'm not going to do it well, or I'm going to do it and people are going to laugh at me, or something like that. Okay, so these were some of the reasons I'm talking about. Of course, as a psychologist who works with kids, I'm talking about my practice, but I'm talking a lot from my personal experience with Kate, of course. And so this is one of the reasons when, especially like 7th grade, Caitlin's mom, Pat, and I just thought, this is just not going to work. And here we live in San Francisco, which is a major city, as you know, and there's like, I don't know what, I forget, 4 million people in the Bay Area because it's Berkeley and all the rest of it, in Silicon Valley. And what special schools are there? Practically none. Isn't that so? It shocks me yet that that's the case. So what had happened is that I had done a custody evaluation for a student, and the family was considering Riverview and Maplebrook, and that's how I found out about Maplebrook School. And I just thought, this is a great school for Caitlin. So she came for the summer program. And this is a personal story. I love this story. It's like, of course, our only child, 3,000 miles away from home. We're leaving her for the summer program for a month. I think it was a month. And Coach Caitlin's crying because, it's a big separation. Then when we came to pick her up a month later, she was crying again. That's a whole different reason. She didn't want to go. And we drove to visit my family in Philadelphia, and Caitlin talked non-stop, and leaped all the way from here to Philadelphia, including, she was just so excited about her experience here. So, but it was a really tough experience. It was 3,000 miles away from home, and this was the year after 9/11. So there was this whole thing about, just the safety issue. It was very difficult. This is not what I would say that. Some people grow up in families where boarding school is kind of like the norm. It's like, I don't know, dad went to Hotchkiss, and so the kids go to Hotchkiss or whatever. Fill in the blank. But that wasn't our experience, and it's not. It wasn't our family tradition. So this was not anything that was on our, what do you call it, radar. So now I'm going to check. I'm going to move over. Now I'm going to talk about myself, but also what I just see with parents in general. And what about parents with independence? Okay. So here's what happens. I feel like I'm going to move out, but I have to be by the microphone. Okay. Is that parents just tend to fill in, right? So the kid is having trouble with whatever or needs some assistance, so we just do it because we know where they're struggling, and it's not that we don't encourage the kid to be more independent, but we just naturally fill in. And I think that what happens with a program like Maplebrook is that the staff, now when I say this, I don't mean this in a bad way, they're more detached or objective based on all their experience with kids. So they'll let the kids struggle where we would run in and fix it. And fixing it is not the best thing in the long run, And I think, of course, that comes from our being protective, but also, quite frankly, sometimes when kids are struggling, I'm an anxious person. It would make me really anxious. So part of what I was doing was like taking care of my own anxiety, right? And I think, parents parents don't want kids to be embarrassed or fail. And then sometimes it takes less time for the parent to do it than what it would be to trying to help the kid through it, So it's like, when you're doing 15 things in a day, it's just like, well, let me just do it, right? But the truth of it is, and I've heard Lori was mentioning this and Jen Scully, and it's just really true. Students learn by making mistakes and quote unquote failing, and having bumps in the road or frustrations with a room. I'm thinking about like with Kate, she had wonderful roommates at Maplebrook. But there was bumps in the road sometimes, but she learned from that. Or this past year, she had a difficulty with she's taking American Sign Language, and she had difficulty with a course and the professor not getting it. But you learn from these kinds of things, and I think that one thing that Maplebrook offers is a safe place to make those kinds of mistakes and learn from them. Okay. Then I think the other thing that happens with parents, and I don't just share this experience, it's like when Kate was about 6, she was going to start public school, and so what we did is we petitioned to have special education services. And, we had all this testing in place, and it was really clear there were, Caitlin has epilepsy, and it's just it was just really clear. So, and we go to the IEP meeting, and the psychologist who did the testing said, "This is all developmental. She doesn't need any services from the school district." And it was like a wake-up call. Because what you want to do, and what I wanted to do, was to have faith that the school district had my daughter's best interest in mind. And they don't. And the reason that they don't is not because they're evil people. It's because they don't have the money to fund what they need to do. And I could go on, but I won't drive you crazy, about California public schools. There's a PBS documentary called From First to Worst, and it's about California public schools. We are only Louisiana and Alabama fund schools more poorly than California. It's shocking. They just don't have the assets. So what I'm trying to say is that, parents also learn that you can't trust people who are supposed to be looking after your child's best interest, whether that's teachers. So, for instance, in the San Francisco Public School District, what a teacher told us this later is that they were prohibited from telling parents that they think that the kid needed special services. They were not allowed to do that. Or sometimes you just get teachers that don't get it. So it's like, so what I'm trying to say is there's this whole level of, what's the word for it? Mistrust that gets built in. And one of the things that I found difficult was when Caitlin came to Maplebrook, I'm giving up control, right? Because Kate's mom and I really had total control. You know what I mean? Total control. I mean, we could control her world. And now here are all these people that we don't know. And we've had these experiences with schools. And it just made us really, really worried. And sometimes what happens is I think parents, that level of worry gets so high is that they don't give the school a chance to really see what they can do with the kid. But also sometimes parents decide, no, we're going to keep the kid with us. And sometimes that's a financial, of course, because there's financial reality. But in the long term, because I have seen students where, they've been now they're in their early 20s and they've been at home with mom and dad and not had the benefit of a program like Maplebrook or other independent living program. And you've got a very dependent 22, 23, 24-year-old, which is not good for anybody. It makes the kid miserable and it makes the parents miserable. And then the other thing I was thinking too, is that, if your parents do become experts on their students. And so, that's another thing where you feel like, well, but you don't know my child the way I know my child. And it's like, I think what it is like giving up control. And giving up control is not easy, I think, for most people. It's really not easy when you have a child with special needs. It's just not easy. And it has a lot to do with trust. And we've probably all had experiences with school districts or teachers or whatever where our trust has been just broken. Okay, the other thing is sometimes parents really have trouble accepting their child's limitations. And what I'm saying is, I don't mean that as like a pessimist. Okay. Of course you want to see what your child is capable of, but it's also really important to be realistic. I wish it weren't this way, but my student needs help with social skills because they don't know how to connect, or they cannot keep up with the pace of the regular classroom. So part of it is, what is that expression? It's like, to be able to deal with a problem, you have to admit that there is a problem, So sometimes it's hard for parents to admit there really is a problem, and sometimes you get families that are saying, oh, no, there's not, they'll grow out of it, or, and that really is, it's a block to taking steps that are going to help your child be more independent, okay? And then what I would say, and I'm going to, is that sometimes, like, when you think about our own peer groups, I'm talking about adults, not the parents, it's like, I'll switch to this first. CHAD, I think people know CHAD, it's the ADD, national network. They do great parent education, etc. CHAD had its national conference in San Francisco in November. So I heard two parents who were presenting, and they started a website called Shut Up About Your Perfect Kid. So go take a look at it sometime. It's shutupaboutyouperfectkid.com or .org, right? And so sometimes it would be like, Jim's, he's in AP biology, and let me see, and then Susan is thinking about, she should be pre-med, or, and then what happens with this is you can feel really isolated. That's what, it's like, does anybody get it? Because our experiences are a different set of experiences. And this is why it's really good to be in a school like Maplebrook, because look, here you all are, with parents who get it, right? We all get it, and we're not alone. And that's really very powerful. And also it's so good to be able to just say, I've heard it. If I have to hear one more anxiety attack about you got a B- and something, get it. You know what I mean? It's so it's true. It's like I started a program at a high school in San Francisco. I love Base School. It's a wonderful school. And they brought me in to start a program for gifted and talented kids with learning and attention differences. Oh, these kids crack me up. They think of the things they think about just amazes me. But sometimes you get parents who are like, they're obsessing about, it's a B+. And, oh my God, anyway, so I can go away. But that would be my therapy with all of you. So I'm going to say, and some of this may be a repeat. So what works about Maplebrook or CAPS or TLC I think what really works is that the faculty and staff see your student in every sphere imaginable, in the dining room, getting ready for the day, what their self-care is like, what their closet's like, what their homework is like, what their classwork is like, what they're learning in the classroom is like, what are they like on sports, what do they do with activities, and it's like you have all this great information from people who see the child, your student, in every situation imaginable. And that's such powerful information about how to intervene, right? What I mean by intervene is what kind of things do they need, what kind of things can help the student. And I mentioned before, MBS really knows its population. And this is what I really think is a great part of it too. The program is incremental with logical small steps. And there's opportunities, to redo and correct mistakes. That's the RISE program, I would say. You know? And so what I see with Caitlin, is that Caitlin now is in her 4th year at CIP, and it's incremental steps, incremental steps, incremental steps, and then the next thing you know, she's making fettuccine Alfredo, right? Or taking public transportation, or doing things like going with friends to shoot pool, or doing salsa in some club in Berkeley. But I mean, other things too. She's like money management, all these things. But part of it is what you need to do is like think about think about in terms of the long term, because it's just going to take our students longer. But they can continue to grow if they have the right structure and support. Okay. And then I mentioned about the teachers who understand the type of learners that Maplebrook students are, and then they can participate in everything. So Caitlin, for instance, was I'm trying to think field hockey. Oh my God, she was vicious on the field. I never knew this about my daughter. She's smiling, but it's the truth. And then swimming, and she was in the school plays, and she did all these other activities. And this is, can you imagine? It's like you're part of everything, and that's so important for kids. And the social skills. I mean, it's like, you know, like the teachers see or the staff see the kids missing each other or misunderstanding, and they can intervene right there. Or for Kate, what really helped is she was in a speech and language group here that was focusing on pragmatic language, and this really, really helped. And tutoring. And then I think for Caitlin in particular, but maybe for your students too, the predictability of the program and the routine. It's like, you know what to expect. You know what to expect. You repeat, and it just becomes part of you. Okay. So what I want to say about, I'm almost to the end here, is so how MBS worked and continues to work for Kate. Well, as I mentioned, what she has learned has stayed in place, it's deepened, and then what's really wonderful, it generalizes to other situations. Right? But that's great. The other thing, and this has always been, I think, part of Caitlin's personality, but I mean, your students too, is persistence. Staying at something, and staying at something, and staying at something, and getting support. Because one of the things I say to our students at Bay School is SAT scores are one thing, but here you are with a set of learning disabilities, can you persist? That's a life skill that's going to last you your entire life past academics, right? Or one of the, I think her name, I'm sorry, I think it was Christine, but it was one of the students who was here too, just talking about what she does for her, working with a nursery school and living on her own. And it's the persistence that's so important. Caitlin has made a ton of friends from Maplebrook, and they remain her friends. So now she has the quickest thumbs that you could ever see in a 24-year-old. It's like, oh my God. But they FaceTime each other, and they come and visit each other, and it's just so wonderful because she has all these great experiences to remember, and they laugh about stuff, that drove them crazy, like drive them crazy. But this used to crack me up, is like they would take long hikes and at the end go to McDonald's, and I thought, oh, of course, this is the San Francisco perspective on things. But they could laugh about these things. And she learned from tough experiences. Because, Maplebrook, and when I say this, for instance, when Caitlin was in CAPS, she was trying to manage community college, because she was able to complete her community college courses in her childhood education, and hold a job and do other, to keep up her apartment, etc. And sometimes this got her extremely stressed out. But she learned to manage it, or she learned where to go for help, or that some things just needed to go. Some things just wouldn't work. And you need to, if it's not working this way with the problem, and you have to work it another way. So I'll give you an example about this. I'm just putting more on to Caitlin, I know. Is that Caitlin, since she's been young, has been interested in American Sign Language. And she took a course at Berkeley Community College at Owen Wells, but there was a second course and the professor just didn't get it. Just clueless. So then what happened is Caitlin then worked with an individual tutor. And that's what she's doing, and she's continuing to learn ASL and loving it. But it's kind of like, sometimes it's like it doesn't work this way. And you can either just get frustrated, and of course, as we all do, and feel like giving up. Then you think, but wait a minute, maybe it can work another way. And I think that she learned some of those skills from being at Maplebrook, and certainly self-confidence and self-esteem. Caitlin's self-confidence is just blossoming from being here. And then just lots of practical skills as well. So that's kind of what I was going to say. And so I know it's a big commitment having your student in a boarding program. All kinds of it's geographic commitment, it's a big financial commitment, and it's just so worth it. And I feel incredibly fortunate that we found this school, because the proof of what Maplebrook does, I see in Caitlin every day. So thank you.